Hi everyone, it's Plastic EP coming in from Melbourne, and I've got a very, how can I say, exciting author here. Now, he's from Melbourne and he's in Melbourne now as we speak, and it's Alan Charles, and he's got a fantastic book, The World Game, Shattered World, the World Game Trilogy. How are you today, Alan?
I'm doing great there and looking forward to this.
All I want to say is welcome back to Melbourne.
Yeah, I feel great. Blood's from our heart, though. I'm an ex-Melbourne High boy.
I know it's freezing.
That's, well, coming from Baltimore, it's the middle of summer.
Now, tell everyone about the fantastic book. And what happens is when you wrote it, a lot of things weren't happening. And this is back in February 2017. So as the books come out, it was self-published, and all these things happened out of what you wrote in the book. Explain that to everybody.
Okay, so I actually wrote it in 2011, right? And then I had one ending for it that I wasn't happy with, and I rewrote the ending in 2017. But all the events that I wrote about in the book, which were fiction at the time, they seem to be happening now. And it's a little bit scary because I was writing it out of fun, and it's turning into reality, such as North Korea may be going up against Iran at some point. Because I can see that happening, and that's what I predicted. So a lot of what I wrote back then was based on things in the paper like DARPA, that's the defense, whatever they call it in. They were working on an antimatter bomb back then. And that's one of the features in my book. I was also looking, I wrote the book during the Obama era, and I could see through it. I could see what was going on. And then he went, and then I said there'd be another president, which turned out to be President Trump, and then he would get knocked out. And it's exactly what's going on now.
Did I ask you, did you write anything about UFOs? Since like now they're trying to say that aliens are real or whatever, anything on UFOs? I'm just curious.
It depends what you call a UFO, because in my book, the whole world gets blown up in the end. So
okay.
Yes, there are. My book has sort of aliens in it, but it has an interesting progression. It's not what they're talking about today. I was more at the same time back in 2011, America's Got Talent and Australia's Got Talent was coming onto the TV. And I thought, this is nuts, these programs. I'm going to have a bit of fun and send them up. And in fact, the World Game is the Universe Has Got Talent, baby. And the judges are based on the personalities of the America's Got Talent judges at the time. You'll recognize them. And I had a lot of fun writing it. In fact, my wife had injured herself at work, and I wrote that book sitting in doctors' waiting rooms for 2-3 hours at a time. That's when I wrote it all.
That's amazing. As I said, this is like, as I said, the book's coming to fruition. When I mean that, when you're able to do a book and you do it the way you've done it and things reveal themselves and become true, that's a bit scary to you as an author, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's scary because I wanted to be an author with profit, dollars and cents. It's turned out I'm going to be an author of profit, not the dollars and cents sort, but I've predicted stuff and it's happening, and it's scary. And it's on Amazon, and every so often I update it on Amazon and say, hey, look what's just happened. I wrote about that, 7-8 years ago before anybody even knew about it.
Yeah, but that's like amazing. It's like an ESP to some point. Like, in other words, anyone can write anything, but when you sit back and you think, hey, something's happened and I've already written it before it's happened, that's pretty amazing to me. Because if it's not one thing, it's like quite a few things. And that, like how can I say, you've predicted it, or it's come out of your head, and like what you say happened. That's or what you've written has actually happened. That is the amazing part.
Yeah, that's amazing, and that's a little bit scary. It's scary to me too, because I wasn't planning to be a prophet like that. I was having fun writing the book, but it's happening. That's what's the scary part. One of the key parts of the book is Yellowstone National Park is over the top of a huge magma plume. It's one of the biggest magma plumes in existence. And if that was penetrated and opened, that you know, it'll just go everywhere. So that hasn't happened yet. Thank God.
What about an asteroid hitting the Earth? You cover any of that?
That was part, yeah, that's sort of in the system, because the book takes the approach, okay, the US president at the end has nothing to work with. Like now, there's nothing in the US to defend it. And all he has is this antimatter bomb that was developed by DARPA anyway. And the antimatter bomb doesn't work quite the way that it was expected. It actually encompasses the whole Earth gradually, the antimatter, and that's what destroys the planet. So the book is looking at existence in space of a few survivors. It's like a Noah's Ark, and and also the reason I looked in. I'm thinking, why is all this happening in the world today? So I had a little bit of fun with that. In that, I started off with Adam and Eve, right? You start reading the book, you think, oh God, this guy's a religious nut. And then it looks at Adam and Eve and the snake in the Garden of Eden. And it turns out that the snake was put in by one of these something mysterious things who are watching us for entertainment. They're watching us blow ourselves up and killing ourselves and the whole bit. And there's something out there is watching us. There's your aliens.
Except they're not. Did you grow up with Lost in Space and shows
Absolutely.
like that? And The Invaders,
Absolutely.
that was one of the big ones that I liked. I mean, like The Invaders, people should go and see that TV show now, and they disappear. These figments, these aliens just disappear into dust. I mean, to me, back then, it's pretty amazing because he's trying to convince everybody there's the aliens, but he's still trying to find the proof, but it's all happening to him.
Will Robinson. You remember? So there's the new version of Lost in Space.
Yeah, of course, but the 1960s one, you can't beat it.
Yeah, Star Trek. That's what I grew up with.
Time Tunnel. I'm an original, you know. I'm a first generation baby boomer, so I saw those shows when they were shown the first time.
Yeah, we're the same. We're the same. We're baby boomers.
See, that makes a difference.
I'll tell you what, I started writing the core of a lot of my books were short stories I wrote when I was 16 and 17. My dad died suddenly, unfortunately.
Sorry to hear that.
It gave me a big shock. It took me out of being an A grade. I was a top of the class student, and I just went downhill. And my escape, I found a typewriter. My dad had an old typewriter, and I took that typewriter and I just lost myself in my imagination, started writing these stories. So the story, this World Game story, has its basis in some of those early stories that I started writing. And most of my books today, I've got 2 other books out in the marketplace.
Yeah, tell us the other 2 books, the titles.
One of them,
what they're about.
Oh, okay. Well, the World Game Shattered World was purely science fiction. I try to keep a slight bent towards it. There is a God in it. I wanted that flowing through, even though it was crazy fiction. It does have that implication all the way through. You'll see that because I'm Jewish and I'm Orthodox, but I didn't want there's a few raunchy bits in the World Game. So if you want raunchy, it's there, baby. But my other 2 books, the next one that came out is called I Am the Witness. And I went back to Egypt 3,500 years ago. And I tried to fill in the gaps of what happened when the Israelites were taken out of Egypt, because you've got the Bible and you've got all the histories, but they spent 40 years in the desert. What the heck were they doing, right? So I have filled that in with my imagination. And the little boy in the desert has prophecy. He has a link with these witnesses throughout the whole next 3,500 years. So he sees what's happening and he's writing this down in the desert. So I am the witness. He's writing this scroll, and that scroll is found again 3,500 years later under the Temple Mount, where they're doing archaeological excavations. And the guy who was writing the book, I Am the Witness, is, as he's typing on his computer, this little boy is seeing what he's typing 3,500 years back. There's this total link through, and people have freaked out. They loved it. And I haven't done anything untoward there. Everything I wrote, though, that book I've written, my youngest reader was a 10-year-old girl who was one of the characters in the book. My oldest reader in Los Angeles, a 99-year-old lady turning 100 in 2 months, and she loved it. She called me up and asked me questions about it. Again, it's available on Amazon, and I'm bringing out a third book now, which is the Book of Esther, the Purim story. But it's not the Purim story. It's the story that leads into how the Book of Esther occurred, why it occurred, what was going on. So all the things that have never been written, but I've researched them, and I found stuff that nobody can, what's the word for it? Nobody can refute what I found. Number one, because there was no one around to be able to refute it. Number two, the logic I'm using is as impeccable as I can make it happen. So people are liking it. It's very difficult to get a publisher nowadays. So I am self-publishing on Amazon. I'm also a graphic designer, so I have all my own equipment, and I actually make my own books. I've made hundreds of books, and my first book, I've given away hundreds and hundreds of copies to seed the market. But it's, I've had customers in Japan. I think I've had in France, all over the world, because of Amazon, thank God. So look for more books from me, and I'm hoping I'll get back to the World Game trilogy. I've still got 2 more books to write there. I haven't finished that yet.
I'm just saying in general, right? My parents were Greek, and I'm Greek Orthodox.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that when it comes to things like, historical things, there's a story. In other words, an event happens. But the problem is over time, the event, I'll give you an example. If you had 10 people in a room and you called the first person out and you told them the story, the event, and then you left the room, then that second person talks to the third person, gives the story. Then the second person leaves, the third person gives it to the fourth story until they get to the 10th person. And then you ask the 10th person what the story is. I guarantee, right, that the story starts out what it was, but by the 10th person, it's something different. Because people tend to interpret a story and then even add to it things that weren't even there. Can you agree with that or not?
We used to call that game broken telephone at school. Do you remember that?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, am I not saying it the way it is? That's human nature. That's human nature. It
does get distorted. So what I've done with my books, I've taken impeccable records, written records. I will use the Bible. I will use the Talmud. Stuff that has been written hasn't been distorted. It's there. It's written black and white. And look, I'll give you a wonderful example from the second book. Every Jewish family has the matzah, the crispy bread, and the maror, the bitter herb. You've heard of the bitter herb? Everyone's heard of bitter herb, no? Oh well, yeah, I'll get you. I'll have to fix you up, mate. So the tradition is, when we came out of Egypt, the people took the Pesach, which is the name of the festival, which was the lamb. They took the lamb. The lamb was one of the gods of the Egyptians. And they took that lamb and they held it in their house for 3 days. Here's the Egyptians. They're busting, they're fuming, they're watching what's going on. They've taken our God. They've locked it. They've tied it to the bed. It's pooping all over the floor. They're feeding it. You can hear it. Yeah, my God, God's beeping. Then they took that God just before they were due to leave, and they slaughtered it. And they had to spit roast it whole. They were not allowed to break any of the bones or anything. And each family had to designate who was going to eat that particular sacrifice, that offering. And they were all sitting around the table. They could cut the meat off it, but they had to leave the skeleton intact so that the Egyptians would see their God being eaten. And on top of that, here's these former slaves that were slaves like 6 months ago. They're eating this dry matzah bread, which was the food of the slaves. That's what they ate for 200 years as slaves. They're eating it with relish, with gusto. This is beautiful. We're eating this bread because we're enjoying it now. And they had to eat it with marrow, with the bitter herb of the work that was done. Now, that bitter herb traditionally is romaine lettuce. Have you eaten romaine lettuce lately? You don't, yeah, I'm sure in a salad, you go to a restaurant, you get a garden salad, it's got romaine lettuce. It's sweet. I love it. I eat it every day. I'm scratching my head. So this is where my book comes in. And this is brand new. None of the rabbis I've spoken to heard of this before, and no one could fault this. I was watching back in, when was it? Probably sometime in 2005, 2006. I was watching an Amazon documentary about the excavation of the tomb of a guy called Ka, K-A, they spell it in English, who was the architect of the pharaoh's tombs in the Valley of the Kings. So in today's terms, he would have been, pardon me, the Donald Trump of the day. He would have been a multi-billionaire developer, builder, right? Not royalty, but he had a lot of money and pull. And he had so much money, he was able to build his own tomb, which was unheard of for a commoner. And when they build the tombs, they also build a chapel before the tomb that sort of directs you where the tomb is. They couldn't find this tomb. They knew it was there. They found the chapel, I think, in 1909. And then finally, they found the tomb fully intact in 1929. So it didn't have the gold and the silver of the pharaohs, but it was an intact tomb. So this archaeologist, a woman archaeologist, and the reference is in my book, you can actually watch this video. She gets a cameraman to pan around the inside of the chapel. And she says, look at the beautiful tiles. All the colors were there. Everything was beautiful. It had been sealed up beautifully. She says, look, every second tile shows a picture of a romaine lettuce. Why would Donald Trump paint romaine lettuces on the inside of his funeral chapel? Now, you got to think about, why is it there? So a little bit deeper dive into the Smithsonian Institute. Romaine lettuce was a phallic symbol for the Egyptians. It was only eaten by the very wealthy and the nobility. Now, every 3 or 4 months in the United States, where I live now, romaine lettuce is recalled because there's E. coli, there's something wrong with it. It's so hard to cultivate it. They pull it all off the shelves. It's a difficult product to make, to grow and to treat. Imagine 3,500 years ago. They had no insecticides, nothing. They had the slaves bent over in the fields 18 hours, maybe 24 hours, I don't know how long, picking the bugs out of it so that the bugs wouldn't eat these lettuces, which were the phallic symbols of the nobility, taking care of them, irrigating them, watering them, because they had to bring the water up from wherever. It was backbreaking work, which we talk about at the Passover Seder, at the festival, that the slaves were made to do backbreaking work. And this was probably worse than the work in the brick pits or whatever they were doing, because they were bent over, it really hurt. So I'm thinking, oh, now I understand why we use romaine lettuce for the bitter herb. It's not a bitter herb. It's a herb of bitterness. It was a herb of terrible work, of being physical destruction. And once you look at it that way, and now it makes sense why we eat romaine lettuce. Not only that, at the very first time when they were leaving, the Israelites were eating the lamb, the sheep, which was their god. They were eating the Passover bread, which was saying, pardon me, but up yours, fellas, we're eating this and we like it. And they were eating the phallic symbol of the Egyptians, which was a demigod for the Egyptians. It was a 3B. It wasn't 1 or 2. They were hitting them 3 times. And the Egyptians had to stand around and watch this. And that is that's a brand new thing no one had ever heard that comes out in my book. So every one of my books, I'm looking for new ideas that have never happened. And my next book has some doozies as well.
I've got to ask you, right? Now, these great movies, right, with, what's his name, Jones, Indiana Jones. I watch these movies And I mean, you watch every single one, whether it's the Crystal Skull or the new one that's out now, and they're just amazing because they do cover like history, they touch on it, and he's like real life when you watch it, plus it's action and adventure. And what I'm trying to say is they're the type of movies that I'll watch from the start to the end, and I'll enjoy it because it's got all the formula of the old 1930 serials and all that in it. And it's like, to me, they're unbelievable movies that will live forever.
And the 99-year-old lady who read it, she said to me, you know, she was originally from Belgium and she still has a European accent. She says, when I read it, I could see the movie in my mind of what you were writing. You write like a movie. And that was my intent, that when you pick up one of my books, it turns into the cinema of your mind. It switches you on. And thank God I have a talent and it's working.
Well, it's amazing that you've done some books. And as I said, this new one, we want everyone to go out and get it. And they've got to read it because I've read the, as I said, people have commented and done reviews and they think it's fantastic. And it like covers everything. And unless you read it, you won't be able to put it down. You'll be reading it from the start to the end. You know, the great thing about some books, you don't know what they are until you buy them. And it's on Kindle too, right?
Yeah.
So what happens is you start reading it and then you get right into it and then you get fascinated with it and then you read it to the end. And as you said, it becomes a movie of the mind. So Alan, what I want you to do is I want you to tell everyone where they can get the all your books.
Okay, so all of my books are available on Amazon. The World Game is under my pen name of Alan Charles. And it's ALLEN Charles, and the I Am the Witness Exodus is also on Amazon under my own name, which is Alan Feiglin, Feiglin. And if you Google Alan Feiglin, you'll see the article from the Baltimore Times back in 2019 when we just got launched and then COVID hit and destroyed everything we were trying to do. So we're coming back again. Next book nearly ready to go. I'm still editing. In fact, look at this. Hang on, wait, don't go away.
No worries, I won't.
I'm looking for it.
Thrilling stuff.
Here we go.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Here's the proofing copy of the next book.
And you haven't shown that to anybody?
I haven't shown. You're the first one to see it.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a fantastic cover. And when do you hope to have that out?
Well, I'm working on the proofing now. I've got to go through it. My wife's proofing it. I then have to do it 2 or 3 times to get all the little bugs out of it. There's a couple of sections I've got to redo. I'm hoping within 2 months it'll be out on the market before the next Festival of Purim.
That's amazing. Now, I just want to ask you, if people want to find you on Facebook or on Twitter or any of those platforms, are you on any of those? And have you got a website? I'm just curious to tell everyone.
No, I've not bothered because I've been relying on Amazon more than anything. I did start a website for the World Game and I just let it fizzle. I didn't know how to do it at the time. Now I'm a little bit more au fait with the website side of things. I am going to develop it and I will have a website for these. And when you only have one book, there's not much point in having a website.
No, but what I'm saying for the World Game, it would be good to have a website and get into it and also have a link for your other books as well. And people can then order it direct to you from you if you want.
No, I am heading that way.
I'm sure you will.
Yeah, that's just been difficult. And I mean, the time it takes to write these things and research and develop them. I do all my own cover work as well. That's all my own work too.
And that looks fantastic too. And I say it's a credit to what you're doing. And as I said, I like books that are like fascinating and things you can get into and read something about what you don't expect. And as I said, your book, The World Game, I mean, people just got to read it. Once they start reading it, they won't put it down. I mean, you only have to go to the reviews and they're saying that. So, I mean, people don't write that if it's not true.
If it's not true. And I don't know any of those people who bought those books. They were all arm's length reviews. And I'm hoping that there will be enough demand to warrant me doing the next volume. I know what I want to write in the next volume. And it's a very difficult series because the next volume is talking about time dilation, where you're able to travel in space at a certain speed, and you're going to leave people on a colony here, and you're going to travel faster than the speed of light, whatever, and you're going to come back, and it's 5,000 years later, but it's only 2 years for you. How do you handle that sort of situation? Think about it.
Alan, also want to say, do you sign the book sometimes? Do you autograph them?
Yes, I do. And I write little notes in them to people and that sort of thing. Yeah, absolutely. And I usually provide a bookmark with it too.
Yeah, that's really good. And also I'm saying a lot of authors, what they do is if their book is sold through Amazon or whatever, and it's not signed, they write to you or do a self-addressed envelope, and you just get a card and sign the card, and they just put it in the book, or they plaster on the book like they stick it on the book. That's another idea too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to, and I'm happy to talk to people about the book. If they've got questions, I'm really happy to answer them, and I'm open to suggestions. A couple of those reviews made suggestions to me, if you go back and look at them, and I took them into account, and I'm doing something about it. That World Game book has 2 versions, actually. There's the earlier version that was on Amazon. There's the new version now, Shattered World. The earlier version stopped. That was it. That was the end of the book. And then I thought, no, I want some continuity. And then I changed the ending, and now I have room to keep going.
That's improvement. That's like an extended version of the first book. That's how I see it.
Yeah, well, it is. And there'll be continuity. And in fact, the Witness series also, the same characters, the characters that are living through the 40 years in the desert, they start as kids and they're getting older and older, but they carry through in all the other books that I've planned.
Can I ask you, have you got a copy of the World Book there?
I don't, because I'm now in Melbourne and all my stuff's in Baltimore. But
I'm sure they'll look it up. All they have to do is go to Amazon. It's there. I've seen the cover. A fantastic cover, right? You can't miss it. I'm sure they can see that there. The World Game.
That's it. Yeah, you got it. So if you look at that cover, that's the world blowing up because of the antimatter, and there's a bit of technology on that cover that was also spoken about DARPA, which was called the Skyhook. I called it the Skyhook, which is a 27,000-mile long cable going into space to a geosynchronous point in space, a Lagrange point. And I have that as a restaurant with a McDonald's. If you look at the picture carefully, there's a McDonald's and a Coca-Cola sign up there. Have a look at the picture real close.
Yeah, they can go on the net and see it. But what I'm saying is this is technology now where I'm showing you the cover without actually physically having the book. And I've got psychedelic background, so I'm making it psychedelic for them too.
No, it was fun making. That's not the original. This is about the 3rd or 4th attempt at the cover that you're looking at there. That was difficult, but I got it.
That's fantastic. I want to thank you again, Alan, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. Look forward to speaking to you again.
Fantastic.